this evening we have a compensation study, and Dr. Nance, could you please do our introductions and let us know? And introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. We are happy to have Vance Jacobson here, and he's going to give a brief introduction of his background. He's been working with us for the past couple of years in some neighboring districts on some salary market comparisons, and tonight he's going to give you a brief overview of what he's been working on.
Thank you.
Actually, this is the face. I'm not an imposter. And anyway, to all the board members and to the district administration, thanks for having me with this project even tonight, and even going back to when I first came on site and found how engaging of a district this was and is, and it's just been a sheer pleasure to work and to actually have them be principal architects along with me as far as really going out and trying to establish a professional standard for the competitive labor market for salaries. And what I thought I would do this evening is take you through just a little quick piece of history on how we got going with this project and what we found and how we presented some solutions, and that'll bring us up to where we are now, and it'll and looking forward a little bit. The survey that we started with effectively started in January of 2019. And it became a consortium of about 8 school districts from moving Tempe east and southeast that all collaborated so that they could get a deal. Basically, we could, instead of doing 8 salary surveys, we did 1. Instead of making 30 trips, we could make 10 trips and serve everybody. And it turned out to be not only a cost-effective project, but it also turned out to be one that we were able to go way out in front of competing districts to be able to recommend systems that were unique to the group that we worked with. And essentially, the original objectives we had in the project were really to look at where we were in the marketplace, to have some approaches. We're coming in right after some pretty profound changes in the minimum wage laws in Arizona, and to get some approaches to staying ahead of the minimum wage, but also as the Phoenix market was getting much more sophisticated, to deal with short-term anomalies that whenever you have an emerging market, you will have positions, occupations that for a short period of time are in a buyer's market, kind of like the housing market right now. I guess that's a seller's market. But anyway, then also get some better consistency in salary ranges, deal with one of the biggest issues that everybody had voiced, and that was pay compression. Promotional differences that just couldn't really inspire people to want to make the move to a higher level job. And then as part of that, and what we had to offer were some computer-aided decision support to give each of the district the ability to have a well-thought-out, sophisticated salary program and have the ability, if you can think about having 250 job titles and have to go out in the marketplace and gather data from this moving target, you're chasing your tail. And so the decision support systems are the kind of things where you you can manage and have measuring systems on how to get jobs into competitive salary ranges and do it in a matter of minutes. Lastly, the objectives included best practices on how to deal with internal pay equity within and across occupation groups. Now, interesting. Here, this is the fun part. If you can see that, well, on my screen it's lavender, but I think it's more like mauve. Okay, if we go across to where it says salary grade low to high, think of going from left to right, 1 through 40 in salary grades. 40 being the highest, 1 being probably my job. And then you have salaries. That colored block was a picture of what the Phoenix area competitive market looked like. Those lines that you see, the blue in the middle for the market, that would be a line for a composite of other areas that had the same cost of living, the same size, and the same growth as Phoenix, either before or during or at some point in time in their economic cycle. And effectively, when we made the presentation to the HR managers, we said, this market doesn't exist. It's a non-market that we as a group in the Southeast area need to engineer our own market. We need to design the market. And that market would be to where we could take, now here's where I fail, because I'm left-handed and I'm trying to operate the mouse right-handed. So bear with me. And so what we try to do is we try to build on this concept where there are adequate spacing between jobs, between skill levels, enough so that people want to get those extra skills to be able to move into higher jobs. That's the first step in dealing with compression. And so collectively as a group, we forged ahead to design and convinced everybody to have master salary schedule with consistent philosophy and also that steeper line that would give you the ability to reflect on bigger differences in jobs with higher skills and difficulty and responsibility. And without question, all of the 8 districts have implemented that concept to varying degrees. Obviously, the Apache Junctions and a few of the others, they can't be as competitive, but within their own competitive limitations, they have a model just like this. The lines are just a little bit lower. And to give it a little bit more detail, that market also included, and I forgot to mention one thing earlier, being a mathematician, part of my economic life is drawing graphs. And so I'm here to tell you that you'll probably end up seeing about 4 graphs tonight, just part of what I do. But in the market, we saw, if you go to here at this low end, this is your hourly jobs, and all the way from the most entry-level service jobs to take, for example, a high school office manager, there was absolutely minimal difference for the magnitude of the difference in the skills, and all through the entire Maricopa Valley, and then you'd see a jump, and then you'd see a really flat curve for classified management, and then you'd see a jump and you'd see a curve for educational professionals and district administration. But each of those jumps ended up with a very flat salary curve. And if you look at that, there has got to be, that's got to be an opener for huge internal equities. And it's also a product of districts doing a lot of knee-jerk. If there's an opening, they panic and they set the salary and without a whole lot of study, and then they end up with a situation like that. The solution, as I alluded to earlier, was to get everybody on, I call it a master salary schedule, but we'll call it a master pay philosophy, in terms of the fact that we want to build a structure where we have, from the lowest to the highest job in the district, the same exact competitive philosophy on how we pay those people when they're at full performance, i.e. the middle of the salary range. And that's what really enabled us to build that solution, define the market. And that graph in the lower right-hand corner, on the previous chart I had those dotted lines kind of banding the outside the market. Those are there. The red lines, I'm bringing it back to Chandler now. Those red lines are what we were able to implement. We knew that from a competitive point of view and having to uptick the salary schedule, that we weren't going to get 100% all the way where we needed to go. We just needed to get the master schedule implemented. And so the red lines are really basically reflecting the middle of the salary ranges that we went live with in June of 2019. What I did is I took the liberty of saying, okay, now the second phase is, there's a green line there, which is 2022, starting July 2022. That's where the district needs to get to not only maintain its position, but also to be compliant with it being a little bit of an above average payer, and also reflective of the magnitude of accountability and jobs, the skills required to run a district with 46,000 students. Lastly, in building those ranges, and you've seen the ranges, you've seen the hourly, and you've gotten a look at some of the administrative, but essentially the last portion of that would be to build ranges that would be of sufficient size, width, I should say, from minimum to maximum, to offer a good set of career growth within the range, albeit annual movement, performance-driven, professional development-driven. And they follow a concept that is used pretty widely in other industries, particularly healthcare and private industry, that the range needs to be of sufficient width so that it takes about, in the perfect world, it takes about 12 years to get from minimum to max. And that's kind of like 3 years of learning the job, 3 years of being competent, 3 years of proficient, and 3 years of being a master in the job. And that's what we call the life cycle of a salary range. And all of that, the same model, only to different numbers and different competitive standings, was implemented not only by Chandler, but by the other 7 districts in our study group. And I'm here to tell you that the other districts that are west and north are now responding to this group, rather than you comparing yourself to this group, that we've developed a leadership in the market, and it's an affordable leadership. That's the key thing. So moving into 2022, we are, I've pretty much already done the numbers and everything, but we'll wait until we get a chance to look it over, make sure we got all the right people in the right places. But we want to be recommending and showing the board a revised schedule that's going to complete the loop for having what you need to have moving 2022 and forward. Prior, we got things implemented. We took a conservative path because the most important thing was just to get it implemented, get us the means to be able to move forward. And so we'll do that. Now, an example of that, I took a salary range kind of right in the middle of the whole structure in the mid-management area. The current range that exists for that, and I rounded it like to the nearest 100, but the current range that exists runs from 78.6 to 11,000. And by continuing to have our salary ranges developed, the starting rate goes up a little bit, probably 2.5%. But the market target, the middle of the salary range, and the maximum, we'd be recommending that those change to a much more aggressive position, and to give you a full cycle capability of responding to the marketplace. And interesting, when I say that the ranges are affordable, that's sort of a relative concept because I can't afford it, but they're affordable to the extent that most of the people are now inside the ranges, and so we don't have that same challenge of huge windfalls just to get people responding to the minimum wage and steepening that schedule. That when they're inside the range, now you can manage your costs 100%. Again, at the risk of repeating a little bit, this master schedule, and we've tested it even as recently as this afternoon. This master schedule is one that gives us the basis to preserve internal equity among all jobs. Because as I'll show you a little in the next slide, the district, all of the other districts that we worked with will now have a job measurement system that we measure job content. We don't compare jobs against Peoria or whoever. We assign ranges to jobs based on how they fit with other jobs within the district. We've already established our standard and our competitive target. Now everything is internal. That we can honestly say to employees that we strive to have the best equity within our ranges. One of the things that having a schedule like this, and also having the technology to maintain when you have new jobs in that, is that from here on out, this system will minimize the need to go out and do ad hoc surveys. For emerging jobs, you kind of test the market to see, just as a double check. But when you go through and measure a job and put it in a range, it's actually more accurate than the market. It literally is perfect a way as you can get to get the proper salary range for any job. One is it does resolve compression, because by steepening that line, we've created bigger spacing between jobs. But compression's in the eyes of the beholder. It changes every minute, and so we have methods to keep ahead of that, so that somebody who takes and somebody who takes a job out at the school site and comes to district office, they don't have to take a pay cut to come here, unless the job is less. But they, or nobody wants to take this one promotion because they'd rather stay under the radar. There's not enough incentive to get to that higher level position. The interesting thing about the thing, and I'll close on that, is we're taking this structure, and with the updates that we have, and we'll have for you very soon for finalizing those numbers, academic and business management all fit on the same grid. We can use it as a guideline for teachers. We can use it, this afternoon we were doing some calculations for educational professionals, i.e. speech therapists, psychologists. Bingo, right on the money. We can use the structure and it gets us virtually right down to the penny where we need to be competitively. It's that tight. Now, what I'm going to just spend a couple minutes talking about before I go into some other areas. The cornerstone of your salary administration program now is built on a state-of-the-art job measurement system. And think of every job, the value of that job, think of measuring it with a ruler. And in that ruler, you get so many inches for skills, so many for effort, so many for work environment, and so many for responsibility. And that ruler gives you a numerical value. And it's the same thing in job measurement. We have a system that is designed that its ability to predict pay gives every job a numerical value. Now we can create a hierarchy. But the way the system works is, many of you know there's a law that was passed quite a few years ago called the Equal Pay Act. And the Equal Pay Act states that you pay the jobs the same that have the same skill and effort, conditions, and responsibility. This system takes it to a higher level. Skills are mental, physical, and social. Knowledge, hand-eye coordination, and working with others. And the effort is problem solving, labor output, and the range of people that you have to work with substantively or influence to get your work done. Conditions, there's the work conditions that are health and safety oriented. There's also the conditions that make jobs disagreeable, like working 10 hours and then going to an evening meeting, coming back at 7 o'clock in the morning, dealing with discipline, dealing with all kinds of different sort of confrontive type situations. And then there's responsibility for the delivery of services, the impact you have on the district's primary product, that being education. And all these together give us a complete capability of measuring every job. And there are usually only a handful of jobs that I've ever not been able to measure with a job measurement system. Most of those are either in the NBA or in Major League Baseball. So they're probably not going to hire me to do their compensation work, especially if you bat 180 and committed 3 errors. So anyway, but everything else for the rest of us mortals, we can move all the way from dishwasher to CEO and have virtually letter perfect alignment. And this is just a little teaser here of there's like 5 of these documents and a 40-page technical manual that goes with it. This is the workbook that people in HR would use to be able to take a job, somebody comes in with a new job or a job we had a couple examples on my last trip where a job's vacant and we want to look at, is it the right design or whatever? You go through this exercise and you come up with the right answers. And it's done. And it's implemented, and there's minimal need to find out what other districts are doing, because I'm not sure we really care what they're doing. That we've got a system, and it can give us the answers that we want. Now, just a review, the master grid concept for the district, it's in place, and anticipating July 1, we are going to use that basis for getting it to where it finally needs to be and finally needs to rest. And as I said before, it can be used for all occupations, some directly or most directly, and some as a good guideline. Now, we still have some enhancement to make. The grid will go, would be recommended to advance at the middle of the range. It would be recommended to advance probably about 2.25%. That could be more or less, but what I did is I looked at where other structures are, and also looked at not only the impact of the current minimum wage change, but projecting where the next one will be, so that on January 2022, if there is an increase, I think the ranges that at the base level are going to protect you at least for a 2-year period. So if you didn't make any adjustments to your grid, you're good to go and you're not in harm's way on the minimum wage, unless they do something crazy. There's been a tendency in all the districts over the last, it's gone on quite a few years, but I've been witness to it over the last couple of years. And that's to, if the state says they're going to give us 5%, we give everybody 5%. The problem with that is everybody's treated equal, but it does not solve problems of internal equity, problems of people who are low in the range with a fair amount of time in the job. We've had examples where in the past, maybe people are near the minimum of the range and they've been in the job 5 years. And you know what happens, a new person comes in right over the top of them. And so when you have those equal increases, you don't improve your internal equity at all. And that's getting the lower paid people within a range, within each range, to bridge the gap a little bit. And part of the next year or so, where I'd like to see the district moving, is to say we have X amount of budget available. Within that budget, how can we make some good faith efforts towards improving internal equity? And that would be that would be making the transition from equality to equity, and equity should really be one of the fundamental goals of any salary structure. And anyway, this is a sample of how we would see it working. Think of this as kind of a matrix, and if you look at a line, you see a set of columns that says salary as a percent to the center of the salary range. So in other words, if somebody is less than 88 on the left, that means those people are being paid anywhere from 80% to 88% of the market target, the center of the range. 89 to 94, they're getting closer. They're getting closer at 95 to 100. 100, if somebody, if it's a 100, that means they are spot on where your competitive target is. Now, the idea for gaining equity solely from the point of having people get off the bottom of salary ranges would work to where if you see in the lowest, the people that have are the furthest away from the market target, their increase would be the highest, and then it goes down as you approach the maximum of the range. We call this a learning curve kind of approach where you design it so that you can move a little faster through the range up until the market, and then after you get at the market or a little above, that's where you slow down a little bit and cost control comes into play. I ran a scenario based on my work in process so far to just update your decision support model, and by applying this this matrix, we would accomplish some internal equity goals, and we would hit a 3.0 budget, 3.0 increase in salary budget. And if it comes to fact that we can only afford 2.5, those numbers go down, but they keep that same descending pattern. And that way we get those people moving forward, but we keep the people that are higher in the range, we keep them whole with cost of living and with the market pressures. So this is my favorite section here. In 2019, getting ready for the 2019-20 year, when we first started working, this district made huge progress. We with Sandy's guidance, we created some ways of trying to get everybody in a range and to try to minimize what we would call windfall gains. And we were able to do all that and get things going. Now the next fiscal year, which closes in June, my comment is, well, what can we say? It's just there's no words for it. But moving ahead, things are gonna get jumping quick. And we know now that that school districts all around are looking at. My projection is basically 2.8%. But 2.7 to 3.1 is kind of like the middle range. There are some that are going to. There are a few outliers that are doing nothing, and there are some people that found some money and are doing 5%. But those are districts that you can put on 3 fingers at that level. And so we think that 3% is not unrealistic. If it needs to go down, I know that there are some there are concerns in the whole valley that that we're not going to have as much to work with. But regardless of how much to work with, we can always make some headway. And again, the key word is good faith effort on internal pay equity. The items that we have remaining, and I know you're in the middle of conferring with your teachers group. I have some ideas that, I guess for lack of better words, could rock the house in terms of different ways of looking at teacher salary. And I'll show you just an example on the next page. And I'll ask you to bear with me in advance, because my ability to use graphics and draw curves instead of straight lines is pretty minimal, is pretty pathetic. So I'm just warning you ahead of time that we'll trust the concept, and the way I drew it may be lacking. But anyway, we do have some ideas, and we have some other districts that already have pretty fixed schedules that are actually thinking about going in that direction, in a new direction as well. And I'll explain that in a minute. Supplementals, the supplemental pay schedule, we're actually working on that right now, and we're going to be continuing to finalize that starting, first thing in the morning. We got started a couple weeks ago, and we're going to be working on that. We will continue to monitor for equity and compression, and then also we look at all levels, but I think at the higher salary grade levels within the district, when you do something, you sort of lose track of those folks, many of whom are in this room, and that we need to renew that. We need to renew that analytic so that we can make sure that we have from first level to mid to senior management have sufficient spacing so that we can attract our good internal candidates. And then there have been some jobs in the last year and a half that have changed. And we are actually, that's the beauty of the job measurement system. I've been working with HR and some other departments, and we see how the skill requirements have changed. We've seen how the accountabilities change. We make 3 coding changes on the job measurement, and bingo, the job goes up into a higher grade, or it stays in the same grade. And so we've got those processes that we're working. Those are the maintenance things with any salary program that make it dynamic. And and that's about it. Then we get it all set up for communications and the decision support model. If we can stick to our guns on doing the equity, the good faith equity thing, I've already built the formula, and it can be adjusted either steeper or shallower, but it all sticks with a formula. You don't take a look at one person versus another. You go with a formula and try to do things ensemble, and then you can look at any individual anomalies. But we're all set up to make that happen. And then that'll be a first year of probably a longer term project or longer term effort internally, which can be done easily, but to maintain that internal equity. And with that, I think probably the best thing to do, I could ramble on about a number of things, but I usually find that if I do this, I end up getting off on a tangent that may end up on a sports desk or it may end up in some other topic. So the best thing that could happen to me this evening would be to work off of your questions and talk about all these different things, because I think we're by getting more aggressive with the program, we want to mitigate concerns, frustrations about where we're headed as a district, and this is the time to open those discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. We appreciate it. I believe that.
Yeah, Madam President.
Yes, Mr. Worth has questions.
Can you share with us those areas where we're out of alignment? I think you specifically mentioned this room.
Yeah, I think where it's kind of spotty, Joel, and some concerns I have are in the mid-management area. I also have, now this is an editorial, but I think I'm right. I'm spot on this. You have probably the best accumulation of or compilation of talented managers anywhere in the whole region. And Chandler's a cool place to work. I love being here. And it's the way I'm welcome, the way people get me engaged in working with them. I can see that those are the kinds of things that as a consultant say that this district's a keeper. Problem is that where you're sitting with some of your mid to senior level people, also where you're sitting with some of your senior level non-exempts perhaps, and a few others, is that you are at risk of losing some very good people. And at least that's my opinion. And I would like to see the schedule address that. And actually, we're actually, by widening the ranges, by looking at a handful of jobs on the mid-management area, and by looking at we've got some people that have retired, and we've got structural changes where we can suggest some design changes. We can fix it. We can fix it right away. And that risk part is probably the biggest one, is where you got key people that, frankly speaking, if I were a recruiter, I'd see Chandler as a prime target. And that's probably not what you would like to hear. But I say it with a lot of humility and honesty, but I think what you need to do with this district is preserve the leadership you have, and also build on that mid-level, because those are successes.
So I'm assuming you could prepare a list of us where you think we're out of alignment and present it to us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because we're going through that exercise now, and we would say, look, we need to make realignment changes with the following positions. And I've already done the math on getting the structure to be compliant with that as well. So I think the combination of both of those, Joel, would get us where we need to go.
Okay, question on that. So the danger in trying to do this over the years is, does the contract include all the extra benefits? I mean, does the salary include some of the benefits in their contracts? Did you analyze that so you can compare?
And we haven't been directly charged with looking at benefits, but as you all know, when salaries change, there is a commensurate change with all the statutory contributions, i.e. Social Security and everything else. But also it does make a difference on some of the benefits. And
let me give you an example. So let's say there's a salary of $100,000 and there's a $5,000 403B plan. Would you consider that when you did your numbers?
I would. I do it in two ways. One is salary is going to get people in the door, and then you've got the other things that are part of that total compensation element. And while we didn't really study, our responsibility wasn't really to study directly those add-ons. We do know that other districts provide them, and that the cost or the value of those add-ons can change based on the demographics of the people that are in those districts. And if it fits within kind of a reasonable band, we'd say that's part of it, and we would consider that. I know it's above and beyond salary, but we would consider that as a reasonable part of the equation.
Well, the problem with what you're saying is, years ago when they posted my job, for example, people were surprised how low it was. Well, it really wasn't, because there was quite a bit of other benefits in the contract. So I guess what I'm concerned about is, I hear rumors that the assistant superintendents and associates are underpaid. But if you haven't looked at your benefits, I don't know that rumor is true. So can you effectively do an analysis for that? for us locally, so we have to?
Oh, absolutely. It's quite easy to do. And because you can look at the whole picture. There's increasingly, in my experience, comes from working in a lot of different states and regions. And when you look at, there are executive benefits, there are managerial benefits, and then there are those that are brought about by either contract or collective bargaining or whichever state, region that you're in. And
But here's
and
the-
those
here's
those
the-
upcharges they can be
Here's what
analyzed. I guess,
concerns me.
bottom line.
Years ago, when we would look at superintendent contracts, some superintendents would not tell the other superintendents everything they had in their contract, and it skewed everything. Now, the only way you can effectively do that is get a hold of the contract.
Yeah.
So
And
now here in
the,
this district, you can get a hold of our contracts and do that analysis. But I don't know how you compare with surrounding districts without getting their contracts.
Well, frankly, it's public information,
Okay.
and they are available, and people that work, let's say, like people in human resources, and they are a collaborative peer group, and they will share information. But if you had to, there would be a way to get it, and I have that information from other regions outside of the state.
Well, but those, yes.
But inside the state, you look at that because, you know that in a lot of the salaries that are reported, there are add-ons for whatever reason that don't get reported, and I know that the state has been calling out a lot of districts on being transparent with that kind of thing. But there are things that aren't so transparent, like bonuses and like performance bonuses that are built in, and or exceptional benefits that are usually, not to get into the Internal Revenue Service regulations, but they're usually acceptable to like what they call top hat or your top 3 to 5 players in an organization. And so where there are exceptional health and insurance and deferred type of benefits, those will be in the contract.
Right.
And those are, I have some data. Sandy Cooper is actually doing some legwork to help collect some of that. And I think coming to grips with what those things are at all levels in the organization, that's not a terribly labor-intensive effort to get you that information.
Yeah, because you'll need to see the actual contracts.
Okay, good.
I guess what, again, these rumors, I've learned to discount them because there's other things buried in that contract. But for example, one of the assistant superintendents is supposedly 3 levels below where they should be. Well, I guess that really bothers me. Here we are, the #1 district with the #1 superintendent, and we're not paying our assistant superintendents necessarily where they should be. And I think that why that's important, I think people have to understand that, for example, Craig and Frank, if they bring in 100 kids each, that's $1 million. We have the ability, these assistant superintendents, to generate huge impact in the district. The teacher, it's incredibly unfair. They effectively deal with their children. Mm-hmm. But these assistant superintendents can make a huge impact. Frank Fletcher can build a great building that we don't have to repair all the time. Lana does great lobbying work and generates great amount of funds. Sandy does a great job of recruiting teachers, impacts a kid's life forever. And that is all dependent on the quality of people we have.
Exactly.
And I think obviously based on our evaluation of our district by other entities, we have those quality staff. And it concerns me. Now it's rumors. Rumors are horrible. So hopefully you can review these numbers and see what's real and what's not real.
I think I'm on top of it.
Okay.
In terms of getting, as I showed you, remember that range I showed you, the little change? Well, that's actually a lower first level management range. And so those are changing, and we're not taking our eyes off the ball with with the hourly jobs either. And it's but just between us, the two of the people that you were talking about, they confided in me that they have good job satisfaction, and so they.
Well, why would we go anywhere else?
So they, yeah,
we're in a stable school
so
district.
So pay's
No,
not,
listen to me,
pay's not an issue, but
we're in a stable school district, and
if you,
why would we go somewhere else? Well, I get it, but still, when we're the best, I think we should be paid accordingly.
well, yeah, and you're absolutely right, because I've gotten to know these two people, and as a consultant, I have to pull away from that, and I have to look at that job as if it's vacant. And if we're going to recruit to get the same talent, where do I need to be in the market, for that? And that's exactly what I'm trying to, I'm pulling together for the recommendation moving ahead for the next fiscal year.
So, for the levels below that, the additional benefits aren't nearly as difficult to find. So I'm hoping if you notice the mid-management, when they're out of whack, I'm assuming you're telling HR where there need to be adjustments. For example, let's say the director of special education. Well, she's an assistant superintendent, but just for now, just assume she's a director.
Mm-hmm.
Executive director.
Yeah.
But again, if they're out of whack too, I mean, it's not just whoever's out of placement, considering we're supposed to be the best district, is what I'm interested in. Because
no,
again,
it's everything that we are all about in terms of this update this spring is exactly that I think with the superintendent retiring, it opens the door for us to rethink where we are and what kind of challenges we are to get the good people. I've met a lot of people in a lot of districts in the last 2 years here, and frankly speaking, in some of the senior positions, you'd have a heck of a time filling it. And so
based on current salaries.
Yeah, because and so I believe that what we finish doing with the salary ranges, again, the first year we got the master schedule implemented. That was 90% of the battle, literally. Now we take that and we perfect it so that we're in a position to get the best and keep the best. And
So
I really believe that when you see
Okay,
the numbers, when you see the numbers on it,
Okay.
you will.
I have two comments,
Yeah.
and then I need to let the rest of the board talk. So being in a stable district is worth something. We're not
I'm
worrying-
sorry, I didn't hear.
Being in a stable district is
Uh-huh.
worth something. We don't have superintendents going out every day. In fact, this district has never fired a superintendent in its entire, and that's worth something, I understand. Question for you, and those really hard to place things like speech therapists, when you showed me your strategy for how you paid. When there's a supply and demand problem, how do you adjust for that?
Well, there's a couple of ways that may not just be money. Getting the right ranges is fine. But if you look around, and I think that occupation is one that's of particular note, because I know a neighboring district whose name I won't mention that has 3 times as many as you do. And I go, somebody's hoarding, somebody's hoarding in the market, and so what else can you offer besides money? Because the variation among those in that occupation isn't a great deal, district to district. And so now what you do is you've got quality of work life that a lot of times when you're hiring doesn't come across the way it should. And you've got a lot of things involved. And the other is, I've been telling clients lately, if you know you're going to have some turnover in professional positions like that, why not, if you got 2 good candidates and you only need one, why not hire both of them and give yourself some insurance of having it? So there are more ideas than just pay, but we were actually looking at those occupations this afternoon. And there will be some changes.
Thank you. Ms. Love, do you have any questions?
Not at this time, I'll question.
Mrs. Brunner?
Thank you for your presentation. I did have some questions about specifically I understand the classified and the compression with this, but it sounds like we're almost placing compression on the teacher schedule because we're shortening the range and pushing the bottom up much faster than the people who got to the top eventually were pushed up when they were at that place, right? And so this 12-year life cycle that you've applied to certified staff, what is the research that shows that is the best cycle to apply to a career that looks like what either a librarian, a counselor, or a teacher?
Well, it's actually, when you take a look beyond Arizona and you look at other states, and when you look at, we'll discuss teachers and that's probably my next slide. I'll move to that next slide right after this. But when you look to that, you look at teachers as one position, and then you move across columns or however you do with credits and experience, but it's still one position. Not very many people go in and say, wait a minute, can't we have 3 levels of teacher? You know, where you have your entry, you're highly qualified, and then a higher level than that. Kind of like, they do 3 levels of professor in college. Why can't we do that in school districts? And so the fact that, you get, basically, there's a mindset that there's only that one level, it's called teacher. And so that limits your salary range. But if you say our teacher has 3 levels or more of competency, it's like us taking salary ranges, 122, 123, 124, and 125. Now what is the maximum? And so and that's how we kind of have to build a teacher's, the whole life cycle for them, because they're, the 12-year life cycle applies for a classic salary range for an administrative or a line position, but keep in mind that 12-year life cycle also has director 1, 2, 3, executive director, and assistant superintendent. Mm-hmm. And so, but we're not doing that. People don't do it anywhere with the teachers, and maybe it's about time to talk about that. And those are some of the things that I personally believe that we tend to miss the boat on really from a recognition point of view, if nothing else.
Vance, but let me give you a reason why that's difficult to do. If you work at Basha and you work in the produce department, they know exactly how much money they made. When you have teachers, it's very subjective, and that becomes divisive and becomes a real problem. In other words, you want to have 3 levels of teachers. Well, how do you define? I mean, there should be criteria and so forth, but it's not necessarily that easy. Say, let's do test scores. Well, they don't have the same level of children. So in government, I've watched over the years, it's just hard to do that kind of evaluation, whereas in a grocery store, you know exactly how the produce is done and how the meat department's done.
And
we
your
don't
children
have that.
can change year to year.
Exactly. Yeah. So how in the world would you put them in those 3 categories and trying to be fair?
Well, we don't have all the answers yet, but I think the important thing is to have the dialogue on maybe some different ways of looking at how we deal with compensation. One of them that I just brought up, and this was my embarrassment on drawing what I wanted to do with a graph. If you look at the teacher schedules that are highly structured, like you would look in mostly like in Oregon, Washington, and California, their salaries grow over their career based on that dotted line. they plod along, and about the time you hit 50 or so is when you start making some halfway decent money, but then you starve between 25 and 50. And I've done enough research with many school districts, and why is it that the one group of teachers that's totally missing is people with 3 to 8 or 9 years of time on the job? They're not there. They're there for 3 or less. They're there for over 10, but that middle group is not there. So why don't do anything about that in compensation? And even when I'm working with districts that have collective bargaining, that have the columns, I've been designing models that load everything in these years right here to get them, not only to get them at a compensation level where we can make them stable in the district, but also treat it just like we do with regular management, like a learning curve. You move to the market average a little faster, and then you slow down. And that doesn't exist in most, I mean, that's almost, it's a national issue. And I know in a couple of the districts here and elsewhere where I'm actively working on it now is to maybe strip away a lot of that conventional wisdom and do it. But there are things like, if we had 3 skill levels, what's our gatekeeper? If you're working in a warehouser, to go from level 1 to 2, the gatekeeper might be forklift or working in a freezer. And they're easy to see. But when you're in a classroom, that could be each semester the demographics could change. It's a little tougher. So then you look at that capacity to learn, and then you look at the capacity to innovate and the capacity to engage students. Somewhere in there, we're going to figure it out, but I think it's important to have the dialogue. And this is an easy fix, because if we go back to the previous chart where I showed that matrix, bingo, we're there. Yeah. And that's a start. It's a start. It's a small start, but at least it'll get us there. But that's a good question.
To follow up with that, then, this is my 29th year teaching, and I've, mentored other teachers, and I've, helped with, I run, teacher burnout prevention sessions for my staff at my school, and all kinds of things. So this is something that's pretty, dear to my heart. And I think we have to, anyone who's in education can tell you, this is one sliver of the pie of why that happens. Because we have a very large percentage of women in this field, and they start having children at 3 to 8 years into, working, that adds a lot of stress and can be a motivator for them to stay home for a period of time. Secondly, you need to look at the fact that that you can only sustain a non-sustainable job for so long. If you don't have the resources and the time to, let's say, case manage 28 kids and teach at, 6 different preps, because you teach students with special needs, you can only sustain that for so long before you burn out, and then you're out of the field, right? Or you switch to another branch within teaching, and then you keep plugging along. And so I think we have to be careful assuming that this is going to be the silver bullet that's going to keep our retention going. I think it's one piece of the puzzle. But the second thing I want to add is that when we do this, we have to remember the people who trudged along slowly, and what that says to those people who are Gen X Arizonans who, when they moved through these salary schedules, or when they went stepless, whatever it was, that it took them 20, 25 years to get where they're at, right? And then what does that tell them? That, the people that have 5 years experience, are where they were 10 years ago, when they were at 20 years, and adjusting for inflation.
Well, that's a
So
mindset
there's I know, I'm just saying it's pretty complicated.
It is,
And I think
yeah.
we would need to have more data and more research on what are all the factors and how they all play together before I would be on board with dramatically changing
Yeah,
the
but
schedule.
the simplest thing that I can convey is the idea of bolstering those years, because it's just about the time they get vested. Now they can move anywhere in the state. And so
Right.
what we're doing is, the only thing we're focused on right here is get them to a high enough salary that they can buy a house in Chandler, and then they'll stick around. And either that or they will, they'll combination of that and engagement, getting them engaged, will be that form of recognition that they want to work here.
Yeah, and because
Yeah.
my concern is that this doesn't come from anywhere. If we're going to really bump up 3 to 8, then that's got to come from years 10 to 30,
Yeah,
right?
and
So-
it'll actually have a cumulative effect. Even though this number goes down, it'll have a cumulative effect, and people will hit their perceived targets maybe a little bit faster. But I think if you worked with those people in a group, they're going to say, well, how come you weren't around 25 years ago? But if you work with them individually, I think virtually every teacher I've ever talked to would support something like that, because they say we need to, I can see enough that we need to start replenishing our organization.
Right. I'm just saying, I'm not saying that the teachers who are experienced wouldn't want to support the younger teachers. They absolutely do, right? And they care about their profession and they care about their colleagues. I'm just saying, where is that going to come from? It's going to come from those other teachers that we're zapping from them to give to the others. And so we have to balance that with all of that and look at what we're doing for all our employees. And I guess my other question is, you kind of alluded to these different levels, and I think Joel hit it on the head when it is so difficult to measure because, I've worked in, with students who were kicked out of inner city schools, and that was a tough job. I've worked with AP kids in classes of 40 with high maintenance parents, and that's a challenge too, right? And it's all over. And I can't imagine what kindergarten teachers have to deal with. I don't ever want to experience that. So,
Remember, these two guys have job satisfaction.
So I do think it's very difficult to quantify performance across these varied areas. And also, we're not considering the fact that we have staff that are leading PLCs that are offering all kinds of supports for younger teachers, but that's very hard to quantify as well, that have developed a rapport with the community over the years, and, all these intangibles. So I'm just throwing that all out there. I'm not saying this isn't a possibility. I'm just saying I would love to have more information. Where we could get it, I don't know.
Yeah, and
maybe you guys have some suggestions, how we can look at it as a big picture.
There are bits and pieces of research on the subject, but a lot of the notions that will take, for example, the learning curve with the 3 to 8 year focus. There's really no research on that. I came up with that. I was doing work with an Indian school that would be an attractive place to go to school, but just the way they pay, they couldn't attract people. And I had the same exact situation out at Apache Junction. And in both of those cases, we restructured their column grid so that we actually could support that kind of a concept. And in both cases, we cut turnover in half in 1 year. And so we solved one problem out of 8. And so now we got 7 more problems to
And if
to
other
work on. And it's a way to, and so a lot of things is, and I know I'm preaching a little bit, but so many of the ideas that we get in our industry sometimes we get buried in the industry, you know, we can't see outside. But I have to remind, you know, if any of you have ever been to Sun Valley, that was developed by Union Pacific Railroad in the 30s. And the guy that came up with the idea for the chairlift to move people up the hill was a fourth grade educated rail worker from Louisiana that had worked on the offloading stuff on the banana boats. And he drew it up, and you've got a ski lift. And so it came, it's an innovation. I guess the point being that innovation could come from other areas. I've had the same issue with nurses and engineers and researchers at different phases of careers. And it's that same exact thing that we would lose the entry-level research associate, the EIT engineer, and we'd have that unfavorable turnover. And if we apply some of those same concepts to teachers, we can, you know, we got those 8 things to check off. We just checked off one of them, you know, to be able to help us along. And a lot of it is you don't need a formal system for that. A lot of it is using a matrix or a mindset of focusing on that peer group that is most likely to leave right after we train them.
And then lastly, would you be able to provide us with some long-term cost analysis on this kind of model? So if we do this, let's say 8 years from now, what is the cost going to be, and how much funding are we going to have to pull from somewhere to fund that?
Usually in the models that I have, I usually take it out like 4 years, and to show where, you know, where people would go, and then you could even plug it in, skip a few years. Where would you be at 8 years or something like that? Those aren't difficult to do, and I've got infrastructure to do that.
Because with possibly declining enrollment in the next several years, we definitely don't want to commit to something that we can't sustain, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, when you think, you know, when you think about some other states that have had to do that, the initial hit in the first 3 to 4 years was pretty significant, and then after that, it kind of levels off and comes into play. They've done that in Pennsylvania, like in the Pittsburgh area, which is even with all the colleges, it was a very difficult place to keep teachers. And they've done that in a number of environments where you could accelerate the growth where you need it, and the costs, if you know the initial hit, the long-term costs over time tend to not be measurably different. I think it would surprise you.
So I'd love to see that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure.
So I guess I have a couple of questions too. As we're moving through, it's me. As we're moving through this, some of our top teachers are probably some of our most experienced teachers and most highly paid teachers are probably pushing up really close to, and especially with some of the additional money that will probably be coming through, Prop 208 money and things like that, eventually, hopefully. Those are probably going to be pushing up against some of our mid-level administrators' salary rise, and even topping out some of those base, being higher than some of the base, I guess, salaries that even principals at various schools would be making potentially.
Right.
And so I guess, is that the middle level management that you're referring to that we also have to really be looking at
built
here?
into that are your first, and the question being the compression, like when you got a really experienced teacher overlapping with an entry level manager, and in every single salary range you will have overlap. I know that when we try to do the spacing, we try to look at somebody with a master's degree and say, where are they most promotable? And we look at masters and about 8 to 12 years of experience. And now how does that shake out, as far as getting promoted? Because when you look at a teacher that has got 30 years and they're totally maxed out, that teacher will have a unique set of value that for a short period of time, I argue that they should be paid more than that position that they might go into. That would just be a change of direction. Mm-hmm. But picking that point at which they now have the skills and the education to be able to move in there. And so what I've typically done is use the range of masters plus 8 or 12 years as a way to judge. And based on that, we're in good shape, but it's also a benchmark we have for HR moving forward that we can actually keep that as a barometer to make sure that those, i.e. going to an assistant principal, that we're gonna be able to maintain those relationships. And so we do get those checks and balances.
And then as you were showing that little chart that we had with the percentages for people who are, let's say, 88% of the mid-range, or the median of the salary range, it just kind of brought to mind for me, if you're going to give 10% raises to everybody, the $40,000 person is going to get $4,000 at a 10% range. But yet if you have someone at 80,000, they're going to get 8,000, which is double. Even though it's the same percentage, the dollar amount that they're going to be getting is significant, is double. And I guess as you look through this, I guess that truly does make the case for some of our lower or newer people to be able to get additional monies, percentage-wise.
When we take that matrix that we had up earlier, where it went 4 or 3 on down, it's kind of like if you take and give everybody $1,000, and that may be 4% to the lowest person, but it may only be 2% for the person that's paid, double of them, and so that bridges the gap a little bit, for the people that are low, and if you think it in terms of dollars, and so people are so used to thinking percent that and that's why I put it as a descending percentile, when in fact it's really like the denominator gets higher, and so the percent gets lower on the increases. But at some point in time, any salary range, that person ought to be able to catch up with the more senior people.
And if you're always giving a consistent percent every year, that person lower will never catch up with those who are higher. Because
if everybody gets this, that's the point. If everybody gets the same amount of money, the same percentage, even within a salary range, granted the person up at a higher range gets more dollars, but even within a salary range, if you all move together, you don't ever accomplish your equity goals, which everybody should be able. Once somebody gets over the market target, the other people should be able to catch up.
Okay.
And that's how we build an effective salary program. It starts with a master schedule, and then it goes to all these little tools that we can use, and by building the equity, we also build by default. We also build retention.
Okay.
And people that are pleased with with the experience.
Great.
As much as you can be with pay.
Right.
Which is 3 weeks. Which is 3 weeks of satisfaction.
Now, did you have more slides, or are you?
Actually,
we only have a few more minutes, so.
Yeah, I believe this is it.
Okay.
It is.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
I'll be giving this so that it can be distributed to the board.
Thank you.
And then I'll do that. We'll do that first thing in the morning, and so that you can have that copy. And then in one of the, probably, I imagine, well, you've got spring break next week, I believe. But sometime in the not too distant future after that, we will have a final snapshot of everything that would be ready for, ready for continuing the process in the next fiscal year.
Great. Thank you so much. We appreciate you working with our staff and coming up with these matrix and all of the tremendous amount of work that you've been doing. I know it's not something that happens overnight.
No, but I do have to tell you that I've had more fun than you could imagine, working through all these challenges. And if you could have sat into any of our meetings in the HR conference room like that, you would find that the dialogue that's going on there and what we're working on is not only do we think it's going to have some value added, but it possibly maybe a little inspiring to do it.
Great.
And anyway, so I think the saddest part is when it's all done. When it's all done, I've got myself out of work.
Well, that's a possibility.
Yeah, there's always that possibility, but but I can point to dozens, if not hundreds, of organizations that have taken a leap, and they look back 3 years and they say, are we glad that we did this or what? It's
Great.
It's a pressure thing now, but they look back on it and they said that was the right thing to do. And I've just got, in my role, I also have to balance it because I have a financial background as well. So I have to make it affordable as a consultant. We push the envelope and then we back off to what's affordable.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming this evening. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's all mine. I'm honored that you guys, the board and senior management has invited me, so I've been excited to do this presentation for a long time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, we are going to take a break until our regular board meeting starts at 7 o'clock. Again, thank you so much for coming, and we appreciate all the information that you've shared with us this evening.